Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, do you ever get just a bit anxious? Do you tend to worry? Can you stop yourself from worrying? Maybe you try to stop yourself from worrying and you can't. If you can relate to any of my questions, stay tuned because I am very happy to introduce you to David Stone, who is the author of the book Unsubscribe from Anxiety. Opt out of the myth that worry is required and take charge of your own life now. Beautiful David Stone. So tell us, that's very intriguing. How is worry required?
Well, as the title suggests, it's not. And thank you, Dr. Duffy, for having me on today. I'm thrilled to talk about this. But worry is absolutely not required. And the reason that we think that it is that we have been trained from birth, and it's reinforced in us every day by society that you're supposed to be anxious about things. I walk through an airport and I see the TV monitors blaring with CNN or Fox News or the Weather Channel. This is what you need to know right now. Breaking news. Yeah. And I don't need to know it right now, as it turns out.
And even the phrase, you need, I'm going to tell you what you need.
Precisely. So we're told, our parents, when we're very young, and they're parenting us well, and they say, now, don't talk to strangers and be careful on the way home and things like that. And when you're 8 and walking home from school alone, that's really good advice. But when you're 38 and you're still afraid of strangers, that's not a healthy thing.
Yes, that's true. The kinds of things that we learn as children that may serve us or may not serve us well as children, like don't trust strangers. I guess parents feel they have to tell their children that, but that makes everybody else in the world but one's family strange. So there are so many things that we learn to do to survive as children that do not serve us well as adults.
There's another one that seems to be very current that I get a giggle from, and that is the incessant hand sanitizing that goes on these days. Everybody carries a little bottle of Purell, and they're constantly wiping their hands. Can't touch a shopping cart without that.
Right.
And I get it that we want to avoid germs, but our bodies are blessed with this wonderful immune system that needs to see the odd germ in order to stay robust, et cetera. And I think it just becomes paranoia.
Yeah,
and
that is it's a very interesting analogy, David. We over-sanitize, like we over-worry. Yes, and it's not necessary. And they're saying that now. They're saying exactly what you just said, that we're not helping our bodies have natural barriers to germs. Yeah, yes. So there's something noble about worrying, like there's kind of something noble about being busy. It's a sign of nobility.
I think that there are a lot of people that identify with their worries or with their anxieties. It's sort of who they are, and it makes me, I can get sympathy. I like to call it the complaining club, and we all get together and talk about how bad things are and how bad the weather is, and now the government, and now you name it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we complain about it, and then we feed on each other, and then, we, as you say, there's sort of a nobleness to it. I just find it feels terrible. I don't like the way I feel when I'm worried or anxious, so I stopped.
Right. And then so many people as a antidote to that will go numb and become apathetic.
Yes. Well, there's all kinds of different, what I find very ineffective ways of dealing with it. Certainly there's prescription drugs that people take. There's alcohol, and there's non-prescription drugs. And as you say, just go numb or escape into one thing or another rather than dealing with it in a healthy kind of way.
Right.
One of the things I find about anxiety, and I, the reason that I took this on, and I had a long career in business and very successful, but I suffered from anxiety, and I literally about 10 years ago worried myself into homelessness. And I finally woke up. I literally woke up one morning in my car, and the sun was coming up, and my leg was wrapped around the gear shift. And I thought, come on, David, you're a smart guy. You can figure this out. Come on. And so I set out to figure it out, and I read everything that I could get my hands on to learn about how my brain works and why I worry about things. And I found my way out of it, and it felt wonderful. And one of the things I learned is that anxiety and worry are sort of subsets of fear. And fear is a really useful thing, and it was built into us from millions of years ago, and the saber-toothed tiger was trying to eat you. And fear is a response to something that's a danger, a perceived threat. So if you step out into the street and turn and there's a bus coming at you, it's a really good thing to be afraid, but then you respond instantly. You know exactly what to do, and you jump out of the way. But you're not worried about the bus. You don't have anxiety about the bus. You have fear. The adrenaline kicks in, and you take action instantly, and then it's over.
Right.
Anxiety and worry, though, are responses to perceived threats that are more vague or more off in the distance. So I'm worried that I won't have enough money for a comfortable retirement, or I'm worried about I've got this mole on my arm, and what it might be. So we don't really know how to take a specific action to deal with that thing. So we just sit there and stew in this kind of low-grade fear, if you want. But the problem is our body responds in the same way by releasing cortisol and releasing adrenaline. And when we stay in that anxious state constantly, then our bodies are constantly in that fight or flight readiness, and that's incredibly unhealthy. It's really good in the instance of a real and present danger, but to stay that way chronically is terribly unhealthy.
It really, really exhausts the adrenal glands. And our whole immune system. And, animals in the wild don't walk around traumatized, even though they have regular life and death experiences, because, as you say, they fight, they flee, and they either escape or they're eaten, and it's over. And then they move back into, okay, yes, I'll keep my eyes and nose and ears alert to the smells of my predators, but beyond that, I'll just enjoy myself. And
precisely
right. So this is the question, David. The question is, when it is more vague. I love your term stew. That's great. Stew in low grade anxiety and worry. And people often don't know what to do. And I always tell my clients in my psychotherapy practice, the serenity prayer is the root of all stress management. You do the things you can. And, of course, you need courage for that. And you even write about courage. Right? Courage is where you take action.
Yeah. And in the book, and we've also got an online course that's based on the book, and what we teach people is sort of a 3-step program. And the first step is to learn about anxiety, and I like to I take people into what I call the laboratory, and you want to be a scientist, and we want to look at it in a kind of arm's length, third-party neutral observer kind of way. And I tell people we've got this blob of anxiety sitting on the laboratory bench, and we're going to study it. Because one of the problems with anxiety is it becomes all-consuming. It becomes a very interesting thing. If you cut your finger, you can feel the pain of it. You can see that it's bleeding, and you say, "I have a cut." And I can feel the pain. It's very localized, and then I put a Band-Aid on it. If you have anxiety, though, what we say is, I am worried. I am anxious. And it seems to occupy your entire self. There's no, it's not a condition I have. It's something I absolutely am. So what we try to do in the book is get people to distance themselves, become a third-party observer, and learn everything they can about anxiety and this whole thing of how did we learn it, and that we were taught it from the very young age, and that it's simply a mental habit that we've all fallen into because nobody has ever said this isn't a good idea. We never hear anybody saying.
Right, and there are other things you can do, and that's the ticket. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the first step is let's learn. We walk people through a process of learning all about their anxiety, how it works and where it came from, etc. And then what we do is we start to take control of it because we want to first objectify it and say, this is something I can control instead of it controlling me. And a big step in that is taking 100% responsibility for everything that happens in your life. Because one of the characteristics of people that are worried constantly and anxious is that it's always things outside of you that are causing that. I'm blaming the traffic. I'm blaming the government. I'm blaming the weather. And if the weather would only improve, then I wouldn't be anxious. Well, if you sit around waiting for the government to change their minds or for the weather to change, you're going to not get very far. So what we want people to do is take control and say, okay, the weather is what it is. I'm going to take control of my attitude or my actions because I don't like the way I feel when I'm anxious. So then what we do is we walk through people through a process and we provide a guided visualization where they visualize the anxiety as a tension in their body. And it always shows up. Sometimes it's in the jaw, and sometimes it's in your stomach, sometimes it's in your shoulders, whatever it is. And we get people to actually visualize it as an object in your body. And then we visualize you making it much smaller than it is. And then you make it much bigger. And then you turn it from red to blue. And then so you're now taking control of it. And then we have them actually take it outside of their bodies and set it on the floor beside you. And now this anxiety is simply an object, and it's like a baseball. And I'm kind of tossing it around. And then I say, I don't need this anymore. And then we dissolve it. And that makes it go away. However, and this is a real key part, because anxiety and worry are mental habits, as you well know, if you're going to get rid of a habit, you need to replace it with something else, because in the vacuum of a habitless mind, it'll just come right back and start itself up again.
Yes.
And so there are 3 major mental habits that we suggest to people that we then coach them to practice and to replace the anxiety. And the first one is gratitude. And that is to begin to appreciate not just the things around you and that I've got food on the table and stuff, but appreciating yourself. There's a little exercise we take people through, and it is the first step is I want you to remember, and we get them to write it down, 5 things that you did prior to you being 18 years of age that you were really proud of at the time and you felt were real victories or accomplishments. And that gets people into the mode of thinking about themselves as positive achievers. And it was funny, we do live workshops, and there was one woman in it, and she could not for the life of her remember anything before the age of 18 that she felt was worthwhile. And with a little coaching, she finally remembered, and she remembered that, and she was a swimmer, a competitive swimmer, and she had won a medal in some competition. And she finally remembered that. And the look on her face when she remembered that was just so joyous. It was wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly she realized, hey, I'm worthwhile, and not everything in my life is horrible. And so we do that, and then we say, okay, what about 5 things when you were in college or in your first job? 5 things when you were, whatever age. And then we bring it right up to 5 things last week that you did that you were really proud of and made you feel good. Maybe it was a conversation with your sister or your mother. Maybe it was a great meal that you cooked. Whatever it was. And now we've got people in the mode of thinking, hey, I can do good. Good things do happen in my life. It's not all just falling down on my head. So gratitude is the first habit that we we get encouraged to replace.
So may I interrupt you here, David?
You please.
Yeah. I like when you added make you feel good and positive things that happen. Because when you look at it as accomplishments or achievements, then it puts us in the mode of human doings rather than human beings. It's the emphasis on I'm nothing unless I'm productive, which is part of our Judeo-Christian heritage. And certainly a good life and good self-esteem has something to do with a sense of some mastery and being in charge of one's life. But that's only a part of it. So many Americans have come to believe, and I think that's part of the problem, that it's all about what we achieve and what we do.
Absolutely it is. And that's a shame because, just sitting still doing absolutely nothing, you're a perfectly fine individual and worthy of self-esteem. And interesting because the opposite of worry and anxiety is self-esteem and self-confidence. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to try and get people to think back about. I am worthy of self-esteem. I am worthy of self-confidence.
Yes.
And the reason we use that tool of things that you accomplished is because that's an easy one for people to get their heads around to fairly quickly. They can remember the things and say, oh yeah. And the other thing about worry and anxiety is it makes you feel powerless. Mm-hmm. And it makes you feel like I'm a victim of all these things. And when you begin to build up your self-esteem, because, of course, self-esteem comes from accomplishments and from realizing that, yes, I am a worthwhile person. And so we want to take people to the opposite place from worry and anxiety and get them used to those feelings that come up inside them when they're feeling good about themselves.
Get in touch, and I like how you ask people about the feelings in their bodies, because that is the origin of feelings. They may come from our thoughts and beliefs, but they live in our bodies. And most Americans, are not fully embodied. We're taught, by the time we're adults, we should be completely in our heads, ignoring our bodies, except once in a while we'll visit our genitals to propagate the species. But beyond that, we're supposed to be in our heads. And some people say is that the head is a dangerous neighborhood to be in.
Well, I really prefer a healthy balance.
A healthy balance, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
because you can't have a head without a body, and you can't have a body without a head.
Exactly. The mind-body connection. So you're saying so much, David, and I want to just comment that anxiety is, as a therapist, I give people a diagnosis. It's very common, generalized anxiety disorder, and that's the whole point. Just as you said earlier, it's not specificity. It's not specific. It's not the saber-toothed tiger, and it's not a cut on your arm. It's vague feeling of fear, and but I don't know where it comes from. What are you anxious about? I'll ask my patients. I don't know. I'm just anxious, and that is really the problem, right? And so to stay with
Here's a very interesting thing that I discovered in all this research that I was doing. You talk about generalized anxiety disorder, and I want to make very clear that I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a medical doctor of any sort. But I understand that you guys have a book that describes and defines all these various conditions. Generalized anxiety disorder did not appear in the book until 1980 or 81, apparently. And it was not long after that GlaxoSmithKline patented Paxil and launched a huge marketing campaign to identify this as yet unidentified disorder. And do you have, this wrong with you? Do you have that wrong with you? And you better ask your doctor if this is right for you. And suddenly we've all got it. And the incident just skyrocketed.
Yes, that is. Yeah.
So I think we've been marketed into anxiety in a lot of ways.
Very good point. And again, that sense of nobility. If I worry about something, somehow you talk about powerlessness. There's a false sense of power. If I worry, the magical thinking, I'm going to change it just by thinking about it. Yeah.
There are quite a few people that say, well, if I worry, that and they rationalize and say, well, if I worry, it shows that I care about my loved ones. If I worry, that's how I solve problems. Well, problem solving is a very different activity than worrying. Problem solving involves rational analysis, weighing options, and then taking action. Worrying, on the other hand, just sits and goes in circles.
Right. That's exactly right.
A month from now, we're in the same spot we were last week.
Right. You do your rational analysis, and then you decide if I should or should I not take action, and whatever the case may be. That's very, very well distinguished. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
You've mentioned action a number of times, and we talked about fear, and it results in either fight or flight, which is an action. And one of the things that we like to encourage people is a habit that I call instant action. So if it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're lying in bed awake and stewing about whatever it is your favorite worry topic is, then what I suggest to people is get up out of bed. You'll get to sleep later because you're not sleeping now, so you might as well get up. Go out, take your journal, and do a pattern interrupt. So go through the exercise, 5 things last week that I feel really good about. And then, as you said, go into the feelings. How did I feel in that moment when that wonderful thing? So reacquaint yourself with those feelings. And then once you're back in feeling better about yourself, then what you do is say, okay, here it's 3 o'clock in the morning. What is something I can do right now in the next 15 minutes that could help alleviate this thing I'm anxious about? So maybe I'm worried about a relationship or something. Could I write a letter to my mother, my sister, my friend, my ex-boyfriend, whoever it is? Don't necessarily mail it, but write the letter and express your feelings. If you're worried about money, could you, right there at 3 o'clock in the morning, start a budget? Write down the bones of a budget that you could say, this will help me get back on track. Whatever it is, you can do something right now. And then what is something I can do in the next 24 hours that would help solve this problem? And what you discover is you feel empowered and energized, and you say, okay, I'm starting to be in charge now, because that anxiety, that worry feels so disempowering. You feel like I'm nothing I do, I'm totally out of control. The world, I'm at the end of the crack the whip line. But by getting up and sitting down and saying, here's what I'm going to do right now, you then start to regain the power. You are now in control of your life again, instead of whatever this, whatever the factor is that was causing you the anxiety. You're now regaining the power. That
is really very well said, David A. Stone. And I just want everyone to know that this is Dr. Duffy Spencer. We are Just Relationships, WHPC 90.3. And David wrote a book called Unsubscribe from Anxiety. Opt out of the myth that worry is required and take charge of your own life now. And is this available online, I imagine, as well as in bookstores?
Absolutely. You can go on Amazon, you can go on Barnes & Noble, you can go on Books A Million, you can go on IndieBound. You can get it anywhere. Because it's new, it's only been out a couple of months, it's hard to find it actually on the shelves in bookstores yet. Mm-hmm. But you can go in and ask for it, they can order it, or you can order it online.
Yes, and I would recommend this book to you guys because what David does is take some basic aspects of behavioral science and emotions and give them positive action steps, just as you've done now, David. And the good news is David is coming back next week, so that this is part one of a two-part series with David A. Stone, author of Unsubscribe from Anxiety. And tune in next week to hear more, because what we did was David told us about 3 steps and outlined 1 step. So we only have a moment left, but I want to say to you that, we know that stress is caused by any stress, all stress, no matter what the nature of the stress is. Lost a car or a lost car's key, it has to do with a perception of being out of control. So what you're doing here is helping people to restore that sense of control. And one basic psychological reason for insomnia in my book as a Gestalt therapist is unfinished business. Unfinished business of the day, or in one's life, a sense of unfinished business. So what you have done is, without perhaps realizing that particular point, is given people some way to finish something, to do something.
Yes.
For 15 minutes, and then to pledge to do something else in the next 24 hours. So, okay, so I thank you for now, David, and for everyone else. Tune in to next week to David's part 2 of how to unsubscribe from anxiety. David A. Stone. And this is Dr. Duffy Spencer saying goodbye for now and wishing you great relationships.